Hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome on back. We are here for day 2 of 2 for illustrating characters with Anthony Jones. AJ, thanks for joining us again. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Just came fresh out of the shower.
Awesome. Clean and ready to go for some gross monsters, I guess.
Yeah.
Before we get into it, let's take a look at the schedule today. We'll check that out. We got a lot more streams coming up after this one, so definitely stay tuned for that. All right, here we are. So after today's character design stream, we have the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge with Andrew. Then we have a character design stream with Sarah, followed by the XD Daily Creative Challenge with Peter Del Tondo. And then the last stream of the day is going to be stream 2 of 2 for Design in the Dark with Jordan and Andrew. And that's going to be the streams for the day, so check those out. We'll have more coming up right after us. And once again, AJ, thanks for joining us. If anyone wasn't able to make the last stream or they don't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you'll be working on today?
Sure. So my name is Anthony Jones. I am a art director, concept artist for the film and game industry. I've worked for projects or companies like Blizzard, Sony Santa Monica, Riot Games, Paramount Pictures, and many more. And I do a lot of character design as well as, creature design. These are my favorite things to draw. But, I also help give art direction and feedback on projects to, make them look artistically awesome to the best of my abilities. That's it. And today I'm going to do another round of creature concepts. Yesterday I did a bunch. Today it's going to be pretty much the same. Talking to you, answering questions. I'm going to probably focus a lot of my time today seeing if I can answer questions, because yesterday I'm sure there was a lot of people that wanted to ask, but we just didn't have time. Mm-hmm. If you're one of those people that you didn't get your question answered, this is the time. I will totally answer it.
Yeah, just let us know in chat if anyone has questions. I'll be keeping an eye out for those so I can tell AJ about them. So put them in chat if you guys have anything you want to know about his process or really anything related to his work.
Yeah, except about process. I'm not going to teach you how I do things. How dare you? Got to keep the secrets.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Super secret techniques.
Yeah, but absolutely ask questions, y'all.
Also, hello to everyone in the chat. I see we got Cody, we got Melancholy Megan, we got Valeria, Bruce, Mia, Joe, Jordan, Daisy. Welcome on in, everyone. Glad to see you all.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Who is here from yesterday? Any repeating offenders?
Yeah, I think I see some. I think I see a few familiar names. If anyone was here yesterday, let us know in the chat. Say hi. Anthony Jackson, good to see you. Welcome on in.
Yeah.
I did have a question kind of off the bat, actually. So you've talked about a lot of the different kind of clients you've worked for. I know you've done a lot of Gumroad videos. You have the school and the teaching you do. I feel like time management for me is a very big and difficult thing. With all these different projects and kind of directions you have going, how do you find a balance to manage everything and not get overwhelmed with it all?
Yeah, I definitely get overwhelmed. And so I don't think that's, something that I don't experience. But what I will say is that I know the remedy. Usually, a good way of thinking about this would be like, I get thirsty, like everyone else, so I drink water, right? That's the remedy to thirst, which is a great segue for me to drink some water right now. Hold on, guys. Being parched is not great when speaking. So when you have time management issues, there is a remedy for it, right? Just like if you're thirsty, you need to drink some water. With time management, you need to manage your time. And so what does that look like? Well, for me, it's about, self-accountability and creating systems that will allow it to happen. Okay. And one big caveat that I usually give to myself is it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not be perfect with your time management. You understand what I'm getting at? Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of times is that people will start saying, oh, I'm going to start managing my time. And they start doing like all this stuff, like go to the store, buy a planner, get all the apps. And then they just don't follow through as much as they were hoping. And then they feel like a sham.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's like, no, it's like, I just need to kind of work towards the right direction, but I want to manage my time better. Okay. And so one of the tools now with that caveat in place, don't be so hard on myself, is using a timer. If you guys look at my screen for a second, I have a timer. Now, right now, I already have a timer for this stream, which is about an hour and a half or so, right? So I already have a good sense of how much time I have to work on specific art,
Yeah.
And so I had to, go do stuff with my dog, because yesterday my dog kept on, getting upset that he needed to go potty and stuff. And, after the stream, I told you guys that I'll try to do better about that. And I didn't really manage my time well. I thought he'll be all right, but he obviously was like, antsy. So today I didn't do that. I made a better set of choices. We'll see if it worked out. Like I said, it's never going to be perfect. But what I ended up doing was I woke up around, 6:30 in the morning. I did some work for my job, because I wanted to like get ahead of that, right? And what time I would have normally used for that, I'm using the time to walk my dog out. Mm-hmm. So I woke up a little earlier, did a little bit of that, turned that in, and then went on my walk with my dog.
Is this all something you kind of keep in your head, or do you write a schedule down for the day?
Well, like I think writing it down is a good strategy, but I'm just kind of like giving you a very, immediate example, right, mm-hmm. of me managing my time that's very current, right? And so I went ahead and, walked my doggo, came home. Oh yeah, before I did all that, I ate breakfast, because I just knew, right? Like I needed to do all this stuff. And I was cutting it really close when I took the shower before the stream, right? I think I showed up 10 minutes before we really needed to go live. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But, I still made it, so it was good. And there was other things that would normally distract me. Like my daughter was pretty adamant on me helping her with her homework. And I said, sweetheart, it's like, like dead early in the morning. Like, just wait till school and I'll help you with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And otherwise, if I didn't do that, if I was like, attentive to her at that immediate moment, I probably would have been running it really short, And so time management to me is a lot of that, right? Like compromise, sacrifice, and self-adjustment. Okay.
Definitely.
And yeah, I use timers. Like, so when I was walking my dog, I had a timer. When I was making breakfast, I had a timer. I was using a timer the whole time. You know what I mean? Instead of saying, I'm going to stop doing this thing at 9:30, or I'm going to stop doing this thing at like 7:30 or 2 o'clock, whatever most of us will try to do. Sometimes you go past because you just don't look at the clock at the right time, Mm-hmm. But if you have a timer, say, I'm going to do this thing in like 30 minutes, and you give yourself a 30-minute timer, you know what I mean? If you accidentally get distracted or really get caught up in whatever you're doing, the timer's still going to go off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes I know that I don't feel like it's enough time, so I'll give myself a timer for my timer, essentially, kind of like meta. Like essentially, I'll just break it into intervals. So if I said 30 minutes, I'll do 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, my alarm's going off. But I know that I'm allowed 3 of these.
Yeah. I think if it goes too long, it's almost becomes like when you have the whole day where you can just kind of lose track of it.
Yeah, so it depends on stuff that I know I'll get lost in time, especially work. Doing work is one of those things, right? Whenever I do actual work for clients, like when you're doing art, you can get really lost in it. So I use a timer almost exclusively for staying focused on making art. But yeah, like I said, using a timer and then being kind to myself if I miss up a little bit, mm-hmm. Not getting too caught up on like it having to be perfect. A couple other things that I think is really good for time management is a little bit of like foresight and strong planning. So a good example of this is that I had the leash, I had the collar, I had the foods, the bags, all the stuff ready, so that as soon as I was done doing my work, I just had to go out the door. Right, everything was like right by the door, and just grabbed it and like walked right out.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is really helpful too, just to kind of think ahead. So, for instance, the way that I am setting up my work computer and with my personal computer, because I have my work computer actually to the left of me, and I'm still setting it up. But what I've been doing is like every day do a little bit by little instead of setting it all up at once, because when I do it all at once, that could take like a day, half a day, like getting all the software and everything. But for instance, this weekend, I think I spent like an hour setting up the monitors and the computer. I didn't install any software. I didn't like log in. I didn't do any of that stuff. And then the next day I did that. I like downloaded all the software, got all the proper tools that I needed. And then I installed a cloud service like OneDrive, right, onto that computer. And then that was it. And then I think yesterday I installed the cloud service onto my personal computer. And now I'm starting to offload the work I've been doing on my personal computer and the tools and all the stuff onto that cloud, right? And today I just got a switch for both my Ethernet and for my my mic and camera. So that way I can hit a switch and it will switch the Ethernet and cable or the internet and all that stuff. It'll just switch over to the other computer. So if I decide to go over there, all I got to do is just rotate my mic, because it's on an arm, over to the other side of my desk. So today is that, right? Getting all the stuff for and internet plugged in, and then basically not software, all the like the working files that I got, and some some hotkeys and other things that I need, right? Set up on that computer, and I think I should be ultimately done with
So just
setting
kind
up
of
today.
breaking down big tasks into smaller, more manageable steps.
Yeah, and even like the idea of having the switch, the strategy there is so that I don't have to. It's very low resistance to kind of switch from work computer to personal computer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because that saves time, right? And I've done that for my iPad. So my iPad I have like a really good workflow where I'll do something on my iPad and then I'll just send it to myself onto my work Slack. And then that way I have it there, and then I just forward that same image to the proper channels. Or if I'm not ready to submit it, I just have it in my Slack. So when I go to my personal computer, I open it up and just start painting on it on my personal computer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
But Slack is an app that all of my, like even on my phone, I have it, so I have access to it much faster than if I put it on like a Dropbox or Drive, which is like a little bit more resistance, So I think about like, what's the fastest way to get my work to me in other platforms, right? And always thinking in this way is a way to kind of manage your time a little more effectively.
Especially when it's these things that you use repeatedly, because that time definitely adds up over the day.
Yeah. The same way I feel about that is the same way I feel about like Photoshop, the tool I use. So for instance, most of you guys have noticed that I was able to paint this pretty quickly, right? Because a lot of the hotkeys I have or a lot of the tools I use are all hotkeyed, right? A lot of them are. There's very few stuff that I have to actually use the drop down menu. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's huge.
And a good rule of thumb that I usually tell myself is that if I am doing something a lot, like if I find myself going here to this thing, like very often, then I should probably make it a hotkey.
Yeah, there's a long time ago when I was switching from the tablet buttons to the keyboard shortcuts. And I just made this commitment, like if I use anything frequently during the process, I just need to learn the hotkey. And I swear, like it really does make a significant speed difference.
Yeah. So check this out. I'll show you some good examples of the power of hotkeys. So for instance, I made a duplicate of this layer, right? You can even see it over here, right? Easily. I made a new layer, right? So this is a new layer, all via hotkeys. But check this out. I can put this on color dodge. So now this is a color dodge layer. Again, that's just a hotkey. Okay. And this is actually not a hotkey that I mapped. This is actually default Photoshop hotkeys.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'll walk you guys through it. So let's do it. Actually, one of them is not mapped. One of them is mapped. So Control J is to duplicate the current layer. That's simple enough. Control J. Control Shift Alt N, I believe, or L. I forget exactly. I switched it, but I think it's N. Control Shift Alt N is make a new layer without asking any questions. If you just do Control Shift N, it will ask you, do you want to name the layer, right? But if you want to like just make a new layer without asking any questions, like no, you just press that. I switched it to W. So now it's Control Shift W or Control Shift Alt W, right? Because it's all on the left. It's all on the left pane of my keyboard.
Okay.
Get it? So that way I don't have to like look down and then think about where my finger's at. So I don't accidentally hit like a B or the M or the H or all the proximity keys there, right? And then when I paint it on here, that's fine. You know, if you press V, which is in selection mode, right, where you're able to grab stuff and move it around like I'm doing here, you know, you can use the layer mode hotkeys once you're in selection mode, meaning that there are hotkeys that will switch the layer mode or the blend mode on the corresponding tool. So in this instant, there is no real tool, so it's focused on the actual layer. And if you press Shift Alt D, that's color dodge, for instance.
Okay, very nice.
Right, and then Shift Alt N is normal, so now it's back to normal. Okay, so now remember I said that's to the corresponding tool. So now I'm in the brush tool, and the brush itself actually has blend modes, right? So then if you press Control Shift Alt D now, you'll notice that it actually changed to color dodge, right? And now it's the brush is actually color dodge. See that? And if you press Alt Shift N, now it's back to normal.
Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful.
Yeah, and so for me, that's just stuff that I learned and mastered. And then here's another one that I've made. I think it's Control Y. I made it. You normally will switch the proof, so it goes from RGB to CMYK. But in this case, I don't really need that. So I remapped it to adding a mask, empty mask. So that way it's not masked yet. And you can't tell because actually it looks like it's completely masked. Yeah, sorry. So Control Y actually masks the whole layer, but you can always inverse the mask, right? And so it's a proper mask. So I can kind of do this. You see that?
Yeah.
Right? And I think a Control Shift Y, I have it where where it doesn't actually mask it. It's still empty. And because I use a lot of masks, you know?
Yeah. I also like what you said about switching I think it was Control Shift N for new layer to Control Shift W to have it all kind of on the left side of the keyboard. I actually did the same thing with my brush size increase and decrease. Instead of the bracket keys, I have it for Z and X. Do you use the bracket keys for that?
No. If I have this fundamental philosophy of like keeping everything more convenient, you bet your butt I switch those too.
Yeah.
Because the bracket keys are all the way on the other side of the map.
Yeah, I found that was the one thing I had to keep moving. So I was like, you know what, I'll just switch it bottom left of the keyboard.
Yeah, I have mine RNT.
Oh, okay, nice.
Those are mine. Yeah. And that's actually from my friend. My friend is the one that did that. And he used RNT. And so forever I've used RNT as well.
Yeah, it's super convenient just to have your hand in one position the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that speed, again, it's just more of that time management idea. But, you know, one thing that I try to do management, and like I said, I'm not great at it either, because I sometimes take on too many responsibilities and I get overwhelmed just like everybody else. But I know the remedy is just to just actually put it down on paper. So I usually, if I put things on a calendar, like I actually use like Google Calendars a lot. I tend to not like miss it, you know, meaning that if I had something scheduled like a play date with the kids or going shopping or even just like little stuff, right? Or doing a painting or working on this, if I put it on my calendar, I tend not to miss it, right?
Yeah.
So I think it goes back to the timer point, you know?
Yeah, I can't remember all the things I got to do normally, but as soon as they're on paper, it just becomes a lot more manageable. I don't have to
Yeah.
stress about remembering it either.
So I try to do that as much as possible, but I still slip and fall. And so, yeah, I usually give the advice of, yeah, whatever works, right? Try stuff. Some people don't like to use the calendar. Some people do, you know? But if nothing works, like if you try all sorts of stuff and nothing works, or you just keep on, missing deadlines or keep on like overwhelming yourself with your time, then it's a fundamental problem on a personal level, like a personality problem. Okay. Because obviously there's all these types of tools. And if you're just saying there's nothing that can work for you, then maybe it's just you need to like change your fundamental like attributes of your character, right? And I don't mean that in like a negative way, like you should change who you are. I'm just saying, like, if this is something that you want to be better at, but every time you try stuff you just keep failing anyway, then you need to approach it differently in terms of mentality. So like if you want to have more time, instead of saying I need more time and then not and trying these things and failing, just pick a thing that you think is the closest to your preference, even if it's not working still. Just pick the thing that's closest to your preference and just stick to that for a long period of time and do micro bites of that thing. So I mentioned the timer. That could be it, right? Like, okay, I'm just going to set myself an hour worth of work and I'm going to do 15-minute increment timers. And I'm only going to do that once a day. Okay. And this 1 hour session, I'm just going to check emails, do all this kind of side work that I always like put aside, and that's it. You're going to do that for every day for like a month or a week or whatever. Right. But the point is that you're trying to change kind of your fundamental character of who you are when it comes to time management. Right. You're trying to fall in love with being more organized, right? Where just naturally you're just not, instead of like just shoehorning at someone else's technique, right? You're just going to change who you are essentially, right? Evolve your thinking on this. Otherwise, yeah, you're just going to keep having the same problems,
Yeah.
And you're going to just kind of always contribute it to like, I'm not a organized person, or I'm not a this and that. And it's totally a fair assessment. It's just that if you feel like it's actually affecting you negatively and you want to change it, then you have to do something, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to admit you're a drug addict, right? But then eventually you have to get off those drugs, if you want to actually reform. And that's the best advice I can give, on top of like, using a timer, putting it on paper, like you were saying too, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes people just don't do it, even if we're giving them this advice. Like there's this whole lead a horse to water, but if they don't drink, what can you do, right?
Yeah. And I think habit's a very powerful thing. Like if you can just do something a little bit each day and just get in that momentum, that can definitely build up over time.
Yeah, absolutely. But like I said, it's okay to just be like, I suck at a thing, man. I suck at time management. I'm not good at this. It's just what you do after you say that, like what's the next steps?
You got to identify those weaknesses before you can really tackle them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, we did have another question in chat. I believe this one was from Melancholy Megan.
I love that name.
Yeah, Megan says this question's for the both of you. How'd you get into concept art? I'll let you go ahead and take that one first, AJ.
Actually, can you go first?
Yeah.
So I can drink this water in peace.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, it was just after high school, there was some period where I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I kind of made it my goal and my job to be like, all right, I got to find out what I want to put my time towards, what I want to focus on. I was going to a community college at the time. I was taking some general ed just because I figured that's what you do. eventually kind of went from film to wanting to do 3D to realizing I liked drawing and painting the most. And I kind of committed to doing that for games. So from then on out, I was just did a lot of self-study, a lot of practice. I was heavily into some online communities at the time, conceptart.org and all those places. And that was pretty much it. It was just kind of a commitment sometime where I'm like, I'm going to do this. And I've just been working at it, since.
Yeah. So my story is a little bit more funny. So I originally went to school. I went to a college as a programmer. And the reason why is because, I'm half Black, half Korean. And so I thought the Korean side would kick in, I'm like, okay, I got the math. And then shortly realized that I was being racist and that the Korean side was not kicking in, not even a little bit, And so I had a hard time with the programming. But I saw that other people were doing like art and stuff. And I was like, oh, dude, I can do that though. Like I could totally do something more creative. Because even in school, I did a little bit of drawing, but mostly I was like a musician and I did some other creative things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was a lot more, comfortable with creative adventures. And so when I saw that that was like a career path of some sort, then I, went all in on that. And when I saw that there was something called concept art, I was like, oh, dude, of course there's something called concept art,
Mm-hmm.
where you can totally basically design stuff for films and games, you know what I mean? And I never even considered that. I never even realized it was like a real career until I saw it at my university and my friends and stuff were talking about it. And I was like, yeah, I totally want to do that. And so that's when I began my journey as a concept artist. But I will say that it wasn't easy though, because I did come from a background where I didn't really consider myself an artist. And so whenever I saw people in my school drawing and stuff like that, and I was just like, I'm nowhere near as good as these people. Like I have to like fake it till I make it. It was really challenging for me to become a good artist, but I ultimately did, because I realized that it wasn't really much about talent. It was mostly about a high octane amount of effort and skill involved to be a
That
good
was
artist.
that was a huge realization for me. I think when I found conceptart.org is I always had this mentality that, you hear a lot, which is like it's talent, you kind of have it or you don't. And when I found conceptart.org and I saw their online sketchbooks, and if anyone's not familiar, it's essentially where people would sort of catalog their entire process throughout the years of the work they've done, the studies, the finished pieces, all this, and you'd be able to see their progress over years. And I saw people go from, pretty much beginners to professionals. And I was like, oh, okay. So it is just a lot of work and study. Cool. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. And I think we talked a little bit about this yesterday. Is like it really is about practice. There's really nothing else to it. You know, like I can tell you how to get like strong chest, by working out certain muscles. But if you don't go to the gym and actually lift those weights, which is fundamentally a simple concept, you're not going to get stronger. You know what I mean? And I think that people understand this, but they just don't respect it, most of the times. This is why, like, speaking of working out, like you have programs like P90X that ultimately fail individuals because it promises this idea of like, in 90 days, you're going to be like super fit, so super attractive from somebody who's like not super fit and looking to try to get super fit, or like 90 days, that's not a big deal, and it ultimately will work if you follow through, right? I think like you will, lose a lot of weight and gain a lot of strength, absolutely, following that program. But the way that the program is structured is that it's like super hardcore, like 90 days of exercise, and good eating. And it's really challenging, and people tend to fall off much sooner. And this is why it doesn't work, is because it's just too aggressive. It's fundamentally right, but it's like too aggressive, and it's too cold turkey. You're like really changing someone's lifestyle like overnight. So whenever I tell people like it's about practice, I don't mean like you should practice like P90X. I mean you should practice like every day for years. You know what I mean? It should be consistent. Like the consistency is more important, not so much the high octane effort, right?
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about how hard did you work today, right? Think about how hard you worked over the year, right? Instead of saying how many hours did you put in today, think about how many days did you work, right? Out of a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so
it's like a marathon over a sprint is what I always say.
absolutely. So let's pull up the calculator. Let's do some simple math. You guys
Crunch
see, I guess I wasn't racist. The Korean side is finally coming out. It's coming to fruition. All right. So if we were to do this, if we were to say like you did like a 12-hour day, like pretty aggressively, but like for, let's say, a span of like 3 months, because it's really hard to like spend that much time every day,
Definitely.
and then you fall. So you do that for about 3 months. So let's just round it out to like somewhere between like 80 days or something like that, give or take the weekends, right? So that's about like 960. What's going on here? Why can I not? Yeah, let's make a new layer. Let's try again. Yeah, it's not letting me draw on here.
Oh,
Yeah, what the heck?
where are you, brush tool?
Oh, I think my Photoshop just completely crashed.
You don't
Oh,
have a
here we go.
selection, do you?
No, it just
okay.
like crashed for a second. Yeah, weird.
There we go.
Yeah, it was like no, I know I went through the gauntlet of undoing the
Oh,
selection
okay. Control
and then like unlocking the layer, but it just was like I couldn't even right click. I think like my Wacom pen or something just like broke for a second. I think actually it wasn't Photoshop. I think it was the Wacom pen for a second. Anyway, what was the math? 960. All right. So then let's say after that, give or take a couple months here and there, you probably spend like 6 or 7 hours, but let's just say 6 for another 40 days or something like this, right? So then if we do the math, oh yeah, look, it's acting all weird. It's all glitching. It's weird. It could be because I'm also streaming, and maybe the calculator is taking more bandwidth than normal. So what we're going to end up here with is what is that? Now it's 1,200, right? Because that's 1,200. Yeah. All right, 1,200 hours in a year, potentially, in 1 year, right? That is given like hardcore 12-hour days versus like 6 or 7-hour days where you're not really trying as hard for like another few months. So, somewhere between 100 and 120 days, or 100 to 120 days that you may have spent actually trying to work on your craft, say. And, you're really aggressive about those days. And some days you take a little bit easier. But there's lots of breaks between because you're really burnt out. So you take like a few months off. This is very common. I see this very often. Okay. And I love showcasing it in this capacity because I'm going to show you what if you just did a simple 4 hours a day for 365 days every day. 4 hours is way more manageable, right? And it's way less intimidating, but it doesn't seem like you're working hard enough. 4 hours only? Right? I should be doing 12 hours, or at least 6 or 8 hours, right? But that's like unsustainable. That's the point I'm trying to make, right? And so if you do the math here, which some of you guys may have already done, you'll notice that not only is it way less intimidating, you actually get 200 plus hours
Mm-hmm.
of work. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
But it's really hard to see that, you know, because this feels inaccurate. It feels like, no, you got to like 12-hour, 16-hour days. But that people burn out and they take long hiatuses because of that burnout. It's very hard for people to come back in. You
Yeah.
actually start to hate art, you know?
I think you got to make it sustainable, because I've always looked at it like I'm going to be doing this for years. So
Mm-hmm.
sometime back, I got really serious about trying not to miss any sleep, because I noticed, if I don't
Yeah,
get enough sleep, the next day I'm less focused, I
perfect.
get less work done, and then that just kind of snowballs. So it's about finding
Yeah,
that like healthy balance that you can sustain over the long run.
absolutely. And let's think about it in like a more localized setting, like just a normal just a normal week, right? So person A, let's say, goes like they have the day that they have to submit is on Sunday. Okay, that's the day of submission of your work. Let's say for like a class, whatever. You know, most people actually kind of just cruise by until like Friday and Saturday, and then they'll like spend like 8 hours each of these days. You know, which uh, collectively adds up to 16 hours of work. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but if we go back to like this other model where I said just 4 hours every day, that's 4, that's 8, that's 12, that's 16. So you already matched this, you know what I mean? And now you just added more, right? So now you're at 24
Mm-hmm.
hours. You know, you have 8 more hours added to that week. Do you see my
Definitely.
point?
Yeah.
And this is like even easier to think about when you think about like 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours before bed, right? That doesn't seem crazy. You could go even more simpler. You can do like 1 hour in the morning, um, 2 hours in the middle of the day, like after lunch or something, and then 1 hour at night, right? Or you could just get it out of the way, 4 hours in the morning. You know what I mean? Just
Mm-hmm.
do all the work in the morning, and then the rest of your day you're done. You know? But people want to like spend way more time than they actually should.
Yeah.
You know? Because it just feels intuitive, right? Like you just gotta like put the mileage in no matter what. You know? Like every day has to be till the waking hour. Every waking hour to the moment I'm like in my coffin, it's got to be work, 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 work. But you brought up a great point that I will kind of like reiterate, which is that there's diminishing returns, man. If you're just constantly tired,
Yeah.
you know, it's like a proper exercise, right? Like you don't work out the same muscle every day at full intensity, right? If you work out the muscle every day at like going all in high octane powerlifting levels every time, you know what I mean? You're going to burn out eventually and you're going to stop, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or worse yet, in the workout scene, you might die, right? It actually may very well kill you. You know, there is such a thing as like having too much of a good thing. For instance, like we need water, right? But too much water can kill you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's called drowning. You know what I mean? And so like it's all about context. Like what are you trying to achieve with your ambitions as an artist? And if you're like, no, I want to like get good, right? Then you can just be way more reasonable with your effective approach to getting
Yeah.
better, right?
Definitely.
Don't look at it like, oh, it's like you said earlier, like it's a sprint. It's definitely more like a marathon. And a even better way of thinking about it is like a marathon that has no end. Like there's no finish line, right?
Yeah.
And if you're sprinting that whole time, it is not sustainable, right? Like you are going to collapse from exhaustion, which
Yeah.
many people probably in the chat are like totally can understand or have been there. And I had a student once where I told them to do this because they were working really hard. And they were like saying like, how do you like balance your time, man? Like, I feel like I have no time. And I told them the same thing. You know, I said, you just need to, actually just be more consistent and do it every day, you know, versus like wait till Friday or Saturday to do your homework, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they did that. They would wake up every day, spend an hour and a half working on a thing, and they would go to work. And then when they get home, they would spend another hour and a half, right? And then play video games, hang out with some of their friends. Because I told them you should do that too. Like enjoy life.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's your homework. I want you to do that. Like after you've done that, like go hang out, right? And they're like, really? And it's like, yeah, I want to show you how much more effective you are when you actually are responsible with that time, you know? And sure enough, she came back on the day of submission, and she was just like, not only did I do more work than I ever did for every other assignment, I enjoyed it, and I felt way more relaxed, and like it was nice to just hang out with friends and just talk and like let loose and just kind of and be a person again, you know?
Yeah.
And I didn't go to work super stressed. Like, oh, where am I finding the time? Where am I finding time? You know, like, and she said it was really hard at first because she was like, oh, I need to spend like another hour. I need to spend 2 more hours. You know, it's not done. It's not done. And then she said, but she remembered what I said is like, just remind yourself that you'll get back to it later today. You know, just think about it. Think about what you're going to do, work on, you know? So when you show up to your desk, you're a little bit more prepared to, you know, you're not just showing up with an empty mind. You've actually thought it through a little bit, you know? And sure enough, yeah, like I said, she says like, this is gangbusters, you know, like this is so much more effective. And I feel like a lot of people have been trained the other way around, and I think that's why it's really hard. And it does work though. Let's not make any mistake. Like really grinding hardcore also works. So that's why it's hard to kind of divorce yourself from it, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that there is a better way, and it takes adjustment. But once you've adjusted to it, you'll find yourself working pretty effectively.
Yeah, I think procrastination can kind of be a big part of that, where you kind of leave it off, and then crunch at the very end. And going back to what we said earlier about like organizing your schedule and that kind of thing, I found when I actually write things down, the kind of invisible burden that's above my head becomes more like manageable. And I'm like, oh, if I just do this on Monday and then I take care of that on Tuesday at this time, it no longer is that overwhelming feeling of all these things, you know, you have to do, but you don't quite have a grasp on them. And I can just kind of plan it out over the week and be like, oh, I'll take care of this here, that there. And it's actually not that bad. So it kind of helps me stay more consistent in that way.
Yeah. And let's make no mistake, I'm not saying that I have got all this figured out. I just know that that's the remedy.
Yeah.
There are still days where I'm thirsty, you know, and I haven't drinking anything all day. And I'm not talking about like the metaphor. I'm talking about like literally, you know, and I am thirsty, and yet I'm not drinking water because I'm so focused on what I'm working on. And then the metaphor example, like where I have work that I need to get done. Even actually I have stuff that I have to do for you guys. I have some like promotional stuff that I have to work on. And I just like keep putting it off indirectly because I have other responsibilities, you know?
Yeah.
And that's no one's fault but my own for not managing that well. And so definitely I know the remedy though, and I just got to implement it so that way I can actually get it done. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So I think it's really okay, guys, to like make a mistake with that type of stuff. But anyway, we should answer some more questions.
Yeah, I was going to say we actually, we got a couple that I saw. One, I know someone was asking when I talked about conceptart.org. It's just conceptart.org. That's the website. But the specific sketchbooks I was talking about, there's a few of them. I would have to like kind of look into it. I know a lot of the original pages were deleted. Like the website kind of purged a bunch of stuff, which I was really bummed about when it happened. So I can't link you the specific sketchbooks, unfortunately. We also had someone who was asking, I think if you typically use flat brushes, and there was a couple questions just about what brushes you use.
Yeah, so I'm using a brush that I got from an artist named, or goes by the alias Peling, P-E-L-E-N-G.
It's my go-to brush.
Yeah, if you Google that dude, like you can probably find his brushes.
I'll put that in chat.
But I mean, I can do most things even with just a straight round brush. I just been getting into this mode of just more and more control with my paint strokes, you know? And so I've been using brushes that are incredibly aggressive when it comes to brush work, you know? They are heavily reliant on your ability to draw well. Oh, I hear my dog. Hopefully he's not waking up.
Either that or
I,
dreaming.
I promise you, man, I ran him hard. So maybe he's just like not having it. He's just like, no, I'm a grown pup now. I need to like run miles. Um, but he definitely can sleep long hours, and he did use the potty for a long extended time. So we'll just have to get over it. Um, but yeah, I would suggest, that even what you're seeing with my brushwork, it still would be a challenge because what you're experiencing, or what you're witnessing, is less about the brushes. It's mostly about the technique. But I will say that the brushes themselves do help. I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, but the brushes don't do anything. No, of course, like I like to think of it like, you can build a table with like, one tool, right? But it does help to use multiple tools to build the same table, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like you could probably build a table just using like a hammer and a screwdriver, but you can also use power tools and that would be much easier, you know?
Definitely.
Uh, and so with that same, example, I like to think of it as like, so really what you want to spend your time though is not on the tools. Part of what I'm talking about there is more about like, do you actually know how to build a table? That, in my opinion, is a little bit more important because even with the power tools, if you don't have proper ability to actually construct the table is going to not be well made, even with the best tools ever,
Mm-hmm.
But let's make no mistake, tools definitely help. Absolutely.
Yeah, the right tool for the job can definitely make life easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to be a little bit more cynical whenever I would hear that question. And I used to have this phrase of like, what brush that be? Because people would always ask like, what brush are you using? What brush are you using?
Oh.
And yeah, it's like, it's just isn't as important as like just getting good at painting. And one thing that I would recommend too is like learn how to make your own brushes too, so that way you can understand brushes that you get from other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you purchase or you obtain a brush from somebody else and you like their brush, but you maybe there's something else you could do to it and make it more suitable to your needs. If you have an understanding of brush creation, then you can not only understand their brush, but maybe manipulate it, make like a remix of it that's even better for your specific needs.
Yeah,
Everyone's different, right?
be able to tweak it in whatever ways you want.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, we had one from, let me see, I may have to scroll up for this one. Yeah, from Becca Smith, who said tips for people who work full time still, making time for art. So making time for art with a full time job.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to use my friend as an example because he's the only person that I know that did this well. I never had a full-time job when I was trying to get good at art. I went to school full-time. So I don't want to make any illusion here that I have the perfect answers for this. But I know people who have done this, and I've had students who've also done really well. So I'm going to use all of them as an kind of as an example. So the best way is just like we were just talking about, management of your time, right? And so what my students and my friend did was just look at their schedule and just put it in the schedule, and almost every single one of them would set some time specifically aside for that. If they had people in their lives, like let's say a spouse that was, in need of their work or their help during the day for whatever reason, there's plenty of reasons, right? They would create an arrangement like, yeah, of course I'll help around this time and that time, but X, Y, and Z time is for me to improve on art. The thing is that I think people need to recognize that being someone who just like has a full-time job and all that stuff, and you're also trying to build another career, it's going to be a challenge, and there's nothing I can say that will make it less of a challenge. It's going to be different. It's going to be harder. And some people are just not going to have those challenges, and you're
Yeah.
still competing against those individuals. So it's just definitely unfair, this is true, right? But when you're building a resume and a portfolio, you can't put, hey, it was unfair for me, so grade me on a curve. You know what I mean? And that's just the truth of it as well. And I always like to use this example to demonstrate kind of the ruthlessness of this. Is like, think of it like this, like you own your own company, right? Like you are the manager or the owner or whatever, and you're going to hire artists yourself, okay? And there's an artist A that submits their work, and it is artwork that is the greatest that you've ever seen, and it's going to fit perfectly for your studio, okay? And artwork B is just mediocre, what you've seen before. You see this all the time in people's portfolios, okay? Who are you going to hire, right? With only that information, you're almost obviously going to hire the person I just said who's perfect for the job, right? The person that you look at the portfolio, it looks great. So person A in this example. Yeah. Now let's change a couple things. So person A still has the amazing portfolio, and person B still has the mediocre portfolio. That those things have not changed. Okay. But the difference is that you now know that person A, grew up in a privileged household. They had a lot of access to great education, great schools, great tools. You know what I mean? Which makes a lot of sense to why they are as good as they are, right? That's it. That's all you know now. Like nothing else has changed. That's the only information that you know now. Like that you now need to know about that person. Person B, same thing. Portfolio is still mediocre. It's like everything you've seen before, right? But they're like, down on their luck. They don't really have access to great education. They come from a little bit more poor background, et cetera, et cetera. Now, morally and ethically, it feels like you should hire person B, right? Like in a if this is like a movie. But like I said, their work is like mediocre, right? Like it's not that great. And the person A's work is perfect for what you're working on. Are you really going to just be like, well, I want to root for the underdog here and hire the underdog, and then come to find out that they are clearly not capable of doing the work you're asking them. You're constantly telling them how to do the work. You're finding that it's more work on your end to teach them to be good artists, right? And it becomes an incredible, overwhelming burden. And this has happened sometimes where I see people do this, and all of a sudden the studio actually falls apart, or the company, because there's too much of that going on in the studio, where people were giving people that needed to have that skill set. My dog is fine. Thought he was hurt. But being overly handheld throughout the whole project, right? So in this same example, I think people still hire person A, and probably would work with person B on trying to helping them out to get a better opportunity. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a movie, right? Like it's not like we're gonna hire that person. And in good movies, they don't do that either. Usually, right? They don't, like in Rocky. They don't just let Rocky fight Apollo Creed. It was by chance and training that he was allowed to fight him. And he was supposed to lose. The odds were against him, right? And he did lose, right, in the movie. But the difference is that he didn't lose in terms of like the soul of the movie, which was that he actually stood up and fought against Apollo Creed. He was able to actually take the hits. And more importantly, he knocked down Apollo Creed. Apollo Creed has never been knocked down ever in his whole career. He didn't knock him out. He just knocked him down, right? Which is great. It's like it's a good story because it doesn't hide reality of like the real life. It's like, just some regular schmo can't just beat the champion, but could he maybe put up a good fight if he has enough grit? Yeah, that's believable. That's relatable too. But see how in that example, like most of you guys would hire person A, and it would be a smart choice. You know what I mean? You would do well. And I'm not projecting any kind of personal thing either. Like I'm not trying to say person A is like a jerk or anything. I'm just saying they had more access. That's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now let's change the script. So person A, still amazing portfolio. Person B, still mediocre portfolio, but we changed the stories. Person A was an underdog and fought through it regardless. They would take night classes. They would stay up all night watching YouTube videos. They had a full-time job to take care of their family. All the stuff that you love to hear from an underdog story, right? And with all of those challenges, with all of those adversities, they still was able to kind of get out of the mud, you know, and make a portfolio that is incredibly impressive, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then person B, they had access to all this privilege. They had access to all these tools and schools, but they just didn't care about it. They're more interested in just like, you know, superficial things, you know, and ultimately led them to a mediocre portfolio, right? And maybe projected as kind of an entitled individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, who are you going to hire? The answer should still be the same, right? It's always going to be person A, the person that has the qualified portfolio. But the difference, I guess, in this scenario is like this is a happy ending, right? Where because person A feels like they deserve it, right? Immensely. You know what I mean? And I'm telling you guys these different scenarios to kind of have your mind think about this of like whether you're privileged or whether you're not, whether you have time or whether you do not, you are the owner of your story. And everybody loves to hear a great underdog story. And for the person who's asking that question, I would love to hear your story become a huge success. And you can be the kind of individual that does a lecture one day and say, you know, I didn't have time, but this is what I did. You know what I mean? And teach other people, just like I said, like I have a lot of students who have overcome these circumstances. And I've had a lot of friends who have, you know, more this so than I did. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I didn't have my own set of challenges, but when it came to learning art, I didn't necessarily have as much challenges as some of my friends did.
Yeah.
You know, I was able to just focus and really learn it.
Yeah.
Which was very, very awesome.
I think one of the things that helped me the most out with that was when I was first getting into it and trying to balance all my time. I'd never done this before, but I basically wrote out my schedule for each day and took inventory of all the hours I was actually using. And I was thinking that I didn't have any time free. I was like, oh man, I have like maybe an hour. And then I kind of took inventory of all the time and I was like, I actually have like 3 hours or, you know, 3.5 hours. And I realized a lot of those hours I was just kind of sitting on the computer browsing, or I was just kind of hanging out, not doing anything for a certain amount of time. Yeah. So I think if you actually take inventory of your hours, and AJ said this a little bit earlier, but basically set aside a certain amount of time each day that you do have and make that your art time. Like this is non-negotiable. This is like, you know, this time is set aside for art. I found that kind of helped me, you know, identify that time and then actually utilize it.
It's great advice. Yeah. I'll tell you like the circumstances that my friend had so you guys can compare and contrast this with your own experiences. He right out of high school impregnated his girlfriend at the time, so she had a baby on the way right out of high school. He was like, oh shoot, I need to like, you know, man up essentially from his perspective, right? And so he got a full-time job, right? He began to think about what his career was. He was always a big fan of art, so he decided to get into arts. You know what I mean? And, you know, he felt like that was his responsibility, you know, like he needed to do this, right? And when he ended up doing all that stuff, right? Hold on, gotta yell at my dog.
Oh yeah, and a reminder that Cody Bear put in the chat, in 30 minutes, we will be doing the Daily Creative Challenge reviews. So keep an eye out for that, and if you want to learn more about it, we have the challenge tab at the top of the chat there.
Great segue. So, you know, my friend, he had like a full-time job. He had to, you know, take care of his girlfriend, then became, you know, they got married and all this good stuff. And then he had to go to school because he wanted to not just be working at like a regular 9 to 5. He wanted to build a proper career for himself. He didn't want to sacrifice that future of himself because he, him and his girlfriend maybe were a little bit irresponsible when it came to, safe sex, right? And because they obviously did not want to have a child so young, right? But that was the circumstances that they had, and they love their kids regardless of the timing of it, right? And he did, and he found a way. He really worked at it, and he was telling me like there would be days where he was like really like strapped with time because he had like classes and work like back to back. And so what he would do is like he would just like at the end of a day, like he knew that he had to work after school, and he also needed to be at school. So he was just like, I'm just gonna sleep at school, like in my car, and then after like when I wake up, I'm gonna go to my classes, and then after my classes, I'll just go straight to work, instead of just like going back and forth from his house and stuff. And luckily, he had his family to help out whenever it was really, really hardcore. Like his family was able to help out in some places, in some areas. It wasn't completely dire straits for those guys when he was just a young kid, but ultimately it was really a lot of like scheduling and planning and thinking ahead, right, to help him manage his time more effectively. To the point that you're getting at, right? Like you really need to like audit that time,
Yeah.
Inventory is part of that. Absolutely.
I try my best to cut out that time that I use for stuff that's just not really productive or even like relaxing, because I think break time's awesome. You gotta have time for that. There's times I may be browsing like Twitter or Reddit or something like that, and I don't really get anything out of it. It's just kind of a time
Sure.
sink. So when you prioritize that day, there's certain things like that I try to cut out as best I can. Also, someone was asking if he mentioned the brush, or if you mentioned the brushes specifically. He did mention the Paling brush. I do have a document that has a link to my brush set if anyone's interested, and it does have that particular brush, which is called Paling's brush. So I don't know where you can find that online exactly, but I can link you in the chat my stuff for everyone who's wondering. It'll just be a moment.
Yes, sir.
And of course, if you guys have any questions, definitely drop them in the chat. I can field this to AJ if anyone's curious about anything.
Yeah, please.
Julio says family helps a lot, especially if they help with the baby. Yeah, I'm always. It's always great to have that support network, but I'm always, impressed and just impressed by people who can balance, that having kids and maybe working a full-time job, all those different things. It's definitely a balancing act to try to find time for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there any other questions that we can respond to?
I'll keep an eye out for that. And also I'm putting my the brush link in the chat if anyone's curious. Like I said, it's named, so if you were wondering about the one we were talking about previously, it's in there. And
we have 30 minutes till the reviews, right?
This is correct? Yeah, about 30 minutes until we're going to go over the daily creative challenges. Pokehan says, I love the way you're sculpting out the character. You actually have a Gumroad, right? That's called Painting Like a Sculptor. I remember getting that one when you put it out.
Awesome.
So is that kind of a way you think about most of this stuff, is like sculpting?
I do. That's exactly right. Yeah, I'm trying to see if my dog really needs to go or he's just being a baby.
Giving you the eye.
Yeah, just because yesterday he needed me to take him out a couple times, and today I walked him for quite a bit. But you never know, man. Like he's acting like he wants to go out, but
yeah,
now he's chewing on the chew toy, so I'm thinking maybe he's distracted. But I'm thinking too, what we can do is, if I have to, we can take a short break right before we go into the reviews.
Mm-hmm.
That would be helpful, so that way I can just go take him real quick, because he's really good about going to the restroom, and then when I bring him back, he's really good about just shutting up.
Yeah, I'll give you a reminder when we're getting a little closer to the reviews. Yeah. I actually have a question myself, which is, I know you've talked about how you've done work for some film, I think, as well as games. Sure. I've heard a lot about the concept art kind of, or concept art in those industries being pretty different in terms of how to get into them. I've heard film, there's a lot of specifics. Did you find it hard to transition between games and film, or is it kind of a natural thing to work in both?
Yeah, it's as challenging as it seems. It's just the only difference is that film usually wants things like yesterday, and in games, there's a lot of just like creative analysis paralysis. So
Hmm.
they have different issues. But in my personal experience, I prefer games because it's more of the crowd that I belong to. Game developers are a lot more nerdier, a lot more like into like nerdy stuff.
Hmm.
Sorry, I don't know how else to explain it. Like if you were to think about like high school kids, right? You got like the jocks and um, the nerds, you know, and that's how I feel about game dev. It's like a lot of people in the game dev industry are those types of individuals, but I subscribe with those individuals. You know what I mean? Like I agree to those principles. Like I like Magic the Gathering. I like playing board games. I like the same types of movies. You know,
Yeah.
um, where I think like in film, you have people that are a little more like they're a lot more of like the cool kids. Again, I'm just stereotyping. I'm not saying that this is like exactly one for one, and that they're like
Yeah.
bull. I'm not even trying to even promote the stereotype of like they're bullies or anything like this either. It's not like that at all. It's just that like yeah, like maybe they're talking about their cars and stuff, and I'm just like I'm not really. Even though Fast and the Furious is like one of my favorite movies
Hmm.
franchises, I love those movies, but not because of the cars, but because of the ridiculousness of those movies. Like they're to me almost like comedies at this point. And
Yeah.
but you get my point. Like that's kind of how I feel about it. And animation is a whole different type of nerd that I also subscribe with. I like those folks as well, people that live in the animation field.
Did you
But
find that getting this work was like approaching the jobs was different? Because I've heard some things about qualifying for a guild and that kind of thing if you want to work in a
yeah,
film.
okay. So if we're talking about like the technicalities of it, yeah, it's definitely harder to get into film
Hmm.
because there are guilds and unions, and
Okay.
I have opinions about that. My dog is definitely not having it. Uh, I'll state my opinions, and then I'm gonna go take this dude out. He did
Hmm.
good though. Last time he couldn't even hang in for an hour. All right, Midnight, I got you. Here, I'll answer this question while holding him. Give me a second, guys.
Oh,
So everybody,
upsiding.
so everybody can have some love for this dog. Midnight.
Yeah, Cody, I can relate. Analysis paralysis, definitely. That's
You gonna
me.
make some noise? Here you go.
Oh, hey, Midnight.
Oh, he's super happy. Um, so so basically, when joining the guild or the union, there's a lot of like yeah bureaucracy and like politics that take like to get you in. It's not very simple. It's not very easy. Where games like no, if you can do the job, you get hired, right?
Hmm.
But there's like caveats like the game industry is not as lucrative, right? But again, like if that's something that's really important to you, then maybe games isn't where you want to be. But hold on, I'm gonna try to full screen this a little bit. Okay. Um, and so then like sometimes people are caught up more on like the money of it all and like the cash flow. But like for me, it's really about like the projects and the people I work with, and I just feel more relatable with people in game dev than I do with film. Even though I still work in film, I do a lot of film stuff, and I enjoy working on the projects. But a lot of times it's usually remote and like freelance. But yeah, like it's definitely a challenge. Like the union and the guilds and like all that stuff's really hard to get into. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes the way that people get in is they get grandfathered in, meaning that like a
Okay.
director really wants to work with an artist, they will what you call it, like go through some hoops and really get them on the roster. But
Hmm.
anyway, all right, I'm gonna take this dog out. I tried my best, guys. I know you guys were rooting for me to have him pass out. I
All right. Well,
swear I
yeah.
walked him for like hours. All right, I'll be right back. Give me like 5 minutes.
All right.
And I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, thanks, AJ. So once again, if anyone has any questions, just let us know. I can try to take note of some of these questions in chat, and we'll see if we can get to those when he gets back. Also, a reminder, we are doing the Daily Creative Challenge review. Momentarily, it looks like the timer is just around 19 minutes. So if you guys aren't familiar with that, the Daily Creative Challenges are done throughout the week. They're set of 2 weeks each. We have them for Photoshop, XD, we have them for Illustrator. And if you want to see more about it, the challenge tab is at the top, but it's essentially each day is a new technique, kind of a new idea. And I think they're actually doing some Halloween themed ones for this Photoshop challenge. So if you want to check it out, it's a great way to learn, great way to practice, get feedback, share it with the community. I'm actually a mentor myself in the Discord. So, you may see me in there kind of giving feedback and advice if you submit it under the current challenge section. So definitely check that out. We'll be going over that pretty soon. All right, so we're going to wait for AJ to return. We're going to take a short break here. Like I said, if you put any questions in the chat now, I will take note of them and we'll see if we can get to them when he returns. So we'll be back shortly, everybody.
And that's the secret to concept art. Oh, sorry. You're like, oh no, what did I miss?
You guys missed it. The secret can only be told once every 5 years, I think.
Yeah, when the moon aligns with Jupiter.
We did have one question while you were away. I think we did cover this a little bit yesterday, but what are your current inspirations or artists that you like?
I like no artists. I only am inspired by myself. There is no other artist.
You've reached the top.
The list is endless, man. Yeah. But if I had to pick to kind of, okay, I'll answer it in two ways. I'll give you the quick answer of an artist that I really appreciate. Linedecker is one of my favorite artists. When I first started out, he was a huge inspiration to me. So that's the quick answer, the one artist. Okay. But the more profound answer is that whenever I draw, right, whenever I paint and do art that you see me do, I am imagining thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of artists and inspiration that I've gathered over the many years of doing this stuff, Mm-hmm. And I imagine each and every one of these people is looking over my shoulder for a mark that I make. You know what I mean? And so there's a little bit of the spirit of all these artists and people that I'm inspired by kind of floating near me at all times. You know what I mean? And so to say that there's only one artist that really inspires me is a lie. There's so many. Yeah. And I always tell people, just go to my ArtStation, for instance, and just go to my likes tab. And you'll see that literally thousands of art, and that's just on ArtStation. Yeah. There's even more on my hard drives and on my Pinterest. It's definitely endless.
Yeah, it's hard to narrow it down. I say the same thing. I'm there's a lot, but if you go to my ArtStation, check my like section, you'll see a lot of them.
Yeah, it really is just a matter of gathering and collecting all of your favorite artists and just always having them in mind, when you're working.
Yeah. It's
But
funny you mentioned JC Linedecker because I looked at him I mean, I remember being really into him when I first started as well, but just recently I was looking at him again to see how he does clothing specifically because I feel like that's a weakness of mine, and I was just like, I forgot how amazing he is. I mean, at everything, but his clothing and folds and stuff is just it's too much. It's too good.
yeah, absolutely. He's really masterful. Oh my god, dude. What happened? What happened? Why are you
Quit
upset?
ignoring me.
Yeah, what the heck? He's being bad, dude. I'm gonna have to yell at him. Hold on. I'm trying to move it so you can see me. I have like a little blanket. Here, bud. All right. Anyway. Yeah. So I'm inspired by all sorts of amazing artists. So really, there's no better way to answer that. It's just it's endless.
It's hard to narrow it down. There's such a huge list, I think, for most people.
Yeah. Any other questions? I think how much time do we have? Like 14 more minutes?
Let's see. Yeah, just about 14 more minutes or so before we go over those. Valeria was saying, "Oh my God, what was the secret?" We can't tell. It's gonna have to remain a mystery for another 5 years. I think that was most of the questions that we had there.
Okay, cool.
Wrote down any others here.
Yeah, so let me kind of like walk you guys through then a little bit of the process here. As my dog is still crying, let me actually yell at him a little bit. I just was like, I love you, dog. Please be quiet.
Work with me.
And his little eyes is just like, but master, let me free. I don't want to be in here. But he's laying down right now. I think he's got the hint. He's actually like, for being oh no, he did not get the hint. For actually being like such a small dog, because he's going to be 12 weeks this Thursday. He actually is pretty good. Like right now he's being weird, but that's because like I think he knows that like he's gonna have to stay in there. Where I think if I'm just working, I'll just get up and take him like often, you know.
Does he ever think you're talking to him when you're doing stuff like this? Because I know
maybe
my cats have done that. They're like, "Oh, you're talking to me? Time to come over and get attention."
I think that's the difference because when I'm working, I'm not actually talking. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm just working, and he's just like, "Oh, okay, we're just chilling in here, you and me. All right, I'm gonna pass out." But right now, here's me talking. He thinks that I'm talking to somebody, probably. Sorry, dog. So we have like a couple more minutes before we do the review. Let's talk about kind of the bit of the process. So, for those of you who are just showing up, one of the things that I do is I like to get like the larger shapes. So as you saw, like most of this image has just been me doodling and noodling. Like it's kind of evolved from where it was at. I decided to go make it a little more styled, a little more sharper and crisper. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, even before that, there's stages where it was really rough and it still looked fine. And I like to start with big, broad shapes, you know, and I like to use angles instead of curves, meaning that like instead of doing a little bit of like this type of stuff, you know, like using gestures, you know, I like to just keep it all angled. Sometimes, not always. I sometimes also like to use curves. Just depends on what I'm trying to do here. And so in this instance, I'm thinking about the overall shape and design, right? And then I start adding in some local values, right? Local values as in like he's got like dark dreads, and then maybe like separate the head here, and then maybe bring in the eye shape, but it's all just shape bound. And then once I have kind of like a collection of the types of shapes that I want, then I'll start to think about like the actual lighting and rendering of this. I'll start laying in like the shadows and start thinking of this kind of like a painter, you know, sculpting in your forms with paint.
Do you try to think very plainly when you're painting?
Yeah, and in fact, I think a lot of times whenever people have a hard time painting in general, or it takes them a long time to get anything onto canvas, it's because they don't actually understand their forms. When you don't understand your forms, it's really hard to light it. I always say, like, if you don't know how something looks, you don't know how, you're not going to be able to paint it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you don't know how, like, this structure of this helmet actually looks, then you're going to have a challenging time, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you can't see it in 3 dimensions.
I think
I
that's what
do,
it.
right? Like I see it, and so I just paint it. I just say, oh, there would be a plane of light here, you
Mhm.
know? There would be a plane of light here based off of where the light's at. Because if I were to show you, and sorry to interrupt you, Sam.
Oh no, it's
Um,
totally fine.
if I were to show you guys like a cube, right? And I said a light source is coming from the top here, okay? And then I say to you, okay, you know, which side is being lit, A, B, or C? You know, the obvious answer is A, right?
Hmm.
So most people actually understand lighting at this fundamental level, but what ends up happening is let's go ahead and just give this whole shape like some sort of local value. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we got this thing here. Um, so instead of you know like illuminating this side as you should, right, based off where I set the lights at, you know, what ends up happening is people like illuminate the edges
Mm.
as if like it's a flat shape. They don't actually see the form. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They like just see like a diamond shape, you know, and then they're just like lighting the edges of the diamond shape and shading the bottom parts of the diamond shape, right? And it's like, what form is that then? Are you suggesting that it's a very thin plane, you know,
Hmm. Yeah, it kind of flattens it.
right? So it flattens the image. But if you see it the way that I see it, which goes back to the point I was making, like people have a harder time seeing forms. It's not so much that they have a hard time um, understanding lighting. Most people actually understand lighting. They just don't understand the forms in which they light.
Hmm.
Then you're gonna have a hard time. But once you realize this and you start practicing your forms painting and you start getting really good at that, when you start designing characters and creatures, right? You design them with lighting in mind to be more dynamic, right? So you create forms on your designs so that they feel way more interesting. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
definitely.
Like I'm sculpting this helmet to be uh, like interestingly lit,
And
depending on the light situations.
that's what I like about kind of drawing angularly. Like I think when you're doing that, you make very definitive choices about where a form change occurs. So I think that can help a lot with painting is just kind of being really um, just making a firm decision where you want those shape changes to be.
Yes, sir. All right. Any other questions? Let's go back to this dude.
Drew Tops does say, how do you flip your image spontaneously?
I think about it really long and hard, and it just does it.
It's force
It's
control.
it's a new feature in Photoshop. It's just think about it, and it will do what you ask it. Sarcasm aside, Control W, a hotkeyed flip canvas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you're curious to where flip canvas is, it is in image rotation, flip canvas horizontal, and you can see Control plus W. That is the secret.
Yeah, another custom hotkey for a frequently used function.
Yeah, flipping
It's
your
definitely-
canvas is overpowered.
Yeah,
It allows you to correct proportional problems instantly. People tend to nah. Go ahead.
I definitely got that habit down. It's kind of like almost unconscious that I'll just flip it as I'm working. I think it's a good habit to get into for sure.
People do not flip their canvas, and then they almost always will have proportional problems. They will have scale problems. They will have all sorts of like fundamental issues with their art.
Yeah.
Flipping your canvas is the easy button to catch that faster.
It's always a bummer when you catch it at the very end. You flip it and you're like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah,
Should have
absolutely.
done this a lot earlier.
Absolutely.
Reverb Mike is asking if you typically use reference material or if this is all just from your head.
Yeah, so the way that I will explain this will be helpful, which is I always use reference. There's never a time that you will see me paint that I am not using reference. Now, this seems weird because I don't have any reference in front of me, right? I don't have any reference on the side of me or on the another monitor. It's literally just this painting, and on my other monitor is the Zoom call, so I can see what you guys see, right? So then, what do I mean by I always use reference? Well, I think of reference in two categories. You have external reference is the reference that I think most people think about when they think about reference, like reference on like a artboard or on like a reference page, like images that you've collected to look at later, right? And then there's the reference that is internalized. So you have internalized reference. So this is the kind of reference in which you've studied images, you studied ideas, and you've engraved these visual informations into your subconscious. Okay.
Yeah.
So that way you don't have to always pull up like some sort of perfect example of a reference for everything that you need to draw when you just start a painting.
Kind of a visual library that you built.
A visual library is the term that most people refer this to.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to categorize it as internalized reference because I think there's this based off of that kind of question and that kind of phrasing, and most people whenever they ask this type of question, even if it's indirect, I'm not trying to make any assumptions here, but like they're implying that like there's just some innate ability to draw well, right? And I'm saying I deserve it. I've internalized a lot of this information, which required me to use a lot of external reference because I didn't know how to do a lot of the stuff. So I had to like reference often and constantly and all the time. I did an image recently for work that was in a circumstance that I've never painted before. And so I had to use a lot of reference, it was dealing with subject material that I've never painted. So I used a lot of external reference.
Mm-hmm.
But after painting it and after observing what was the things that I didn't understand and now what I do understand, I have that ability now in my subconscious,
Yeah.
That's something that now it's like in my tool belt of things I can just kind of pull out of nowhere, right? Because I've also, with the years of trained myself to be pretty good about maintaining information that I've just acquired on the visual front, which is a really good superpower for sure. But it's like a skill that you can train, just like anything.
Yeah, I definitely find myself using a lot more reference whenever it's a new subject matter and get big folders full of that, study them, and yeah, you definitely retain it kind of the next time you're approaching the same thing.
Yes, sir.
And then just a heads up, it looks like we just got a couple more minutes before we go over the daily creative challenges. So whenever you get to a good stopping point, we can flip over.
We got 2 minutes. Let's add all the bells and whistles then.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do it. The
All the
stuff
fancy bits.
All right, let's add some chromatic aberration. No lens flare this time. Yeah, there you go. It makes it feel a little more realistic.
If anyone missed it yesterday, there was a section with this too, so it's always kind of cool to see.
Noise.
How do you call it finished? What do you do?
And then do this. Scale it up. Let's add a gradient map. Let's just add immediate color to this.
Do you often colorize things with a gradient map to get it going?
Not at all.
Okay.
I'm just doing it now because it's
quick,
fast.
Yeah.
And it looks cool right away. All right. So I just need to adjust some of this. So that way it's a little bit cooler. All right. And then let's go ahead and just knock this down a bit so it's not so aggressive. And then let's add a color lookup. And see if we can find something that feels cinematic. I call this like the Instagram filter
Yeah,
mode.
definitely has
Yeah.
that vibe to it.
All right. I think there's one actually above that I like. Ooh, this one's pretty cool. I think it was Drop Blues. Yeah, this one's cool. And then let's actually, how much time do I have? I guess we're done here. Yeah, I'll just stop here.
Okay.
So there you go.
Very nice. And Bruce did ask if you wanted to colorize this particular piece, how would you go about doing it? I know yesterday you used like a
Sure.
multiply layer. Is it just a few different blending modes that you like to use for that?
Yeah, it just depends. There's all sorts of ways, my friend. You can
Mhm.
use, yeah, you can use color layers. You can use overlay. I like to use, whatever makes sense for the painting that I'm doing. Not everything requires the same process.
Yeah, kind of situational.
Yeah, it's all situational for me. But yeah, there you have it, guys.
Awesome. Finishing it off with some highlights.
Yeah, trying to spice it up a bit. All right, cool. I'm just gonna stop there.
All right, perfect. Yeah, we can switch on over to the daily creative challenges. Once again, if anyone isn't familiar, you can jump into the daily creative challenge for Photoshop. We just started that this week. So the first challenge is actually today. Yesterday was just an introduction day. If you'd like to learn more about that, check out the challenge tab above the chat there. And we're going to be reviewing some of the submissions so far and giving some feedback.
All right.
All right. So here we are. We'll go through these. I'm not sure how many submissions we have so far. I know this challenge was just done, so we may not have a ton, but it actually, yeah, it looks like there's a few. So we'll check out what we got. First one is from Frank. Frank is always doing awesome work. Here's this. It's kind of a ghostly challenge today. It's a sort of creepy ghost-like effect. So this one, I think, hit the nail on the head for sure with that ghost effect. Got some really nice transparency there. The kind of classic blue glowing ghostly color. Axe is super creepy.
Yeah. So the feedback I would give for this, right, is that you want to kind of make it so that the lighting of the ghost matches the lighting of the environment, which seems weird because my dog's all, he agrees. He's like, yeah, I think so. It seems weird because when you think about like ghosts, they're like glow in the dark, you know what I mean? And it's weird to think that like a ghost would like actually have like lighting hit them, you know? But I think the reason why you would want to do this is so that it feels more tangible to the environment, right? So it doesn't feel like you put like a photo of a person into an environment and then just like cranked up the blue glow effect. You know what I mean? What's wrong with you, dog? Why do you keep getting upset? And so that's the reason why I would suggest that. So if you take a look at this image, like the lighting from the cabin of the subway car, it's hard to distinguish exactly where the lighting's coming from what I'm seeing here. But what I can say that is that the light seems to be coming at an angle that feels a little bit more. I guess the best way to explain it is like a little bit more like coming from the camera. It's not so much like straight on her, where from her it looks like the lighting's coming both like straight in front of her and from the side. So it's really hard to tell, you know? But like I said, like ghosts are notoriously challenging even in film. Like people have a hard time kind of doing this type of stuff, you know? So I wouldn't, you know, move it past you that you're having a hard time dealing like trying to match the ghostly figure with like the environment. And then one thing I would do too is like if you're making them glow in the dark, another thing that could help is to make the character actually illuminate in the environment illuminate the environment a little bit more, like the ground and like the stuff next to her, like the railings. That could be helpful too, you know, to make this feel a little bit more grounded into the environment. Yeah, that's it.
Very nice. One minor thing I want to point out is near her hand on the left-hand side, it almost looks like a section of the axe, the orange of the axe specifically in the handle. It seems like it's not really affected by that. So I think kind of turning that with the rest of the effect of the blue and stuff would be good. But yeah, it's looking
I
great,
agree.
Frank. And we got Ken up next with this sort of a creepy motion blur effect. I like the focus on the face there.
Yeah. So my initial reaction to this is super cool. I like it. But the only thing that makes it feel weird is that the background feels like a lower resolution than the character, like the main subject, right? Like her face is super crisp where the background feels a little bit more low res. And I also think there's a little bit of perspective problem as well as like maybe camera lens inaccuracy. Like this is a problem whenever people mash two photos together, is that photos have different types of perspectives, different kinds of lenses, and different kinds of angles from where they are, like the photography is actually taken. Does this make sense? Like, and it's like, it's super nuanced, right? It's like really hard to know, like, did they use a 35 millimeter, you know, versus like a 55 or something like this? Was the horizon line above or below, you know, when you're looking at the photo? Like when I look at the photo of this person, it's hard to tell because a lot of it's obscured, but it seems to me that the horizon line would actually be lower than the horizon line of the background. And because of these two factors, it feels also a little jarring, right? How I would do this is because I think it's lower, I would actually make her taller, or I'll put her higher in the frame. Like see like where her head is touching that kind of railing. Yeah, I would put it over. It would overlap that. It would go past that. But then you have the problem of like, well, she'll look super tall now, right? Which is accurate, but it would feel like accurate to the perspective. So that's one way. So if we don't want to make her feel tall, we would do the opposite then. Take the background and shift it in a way where the perspective of the horizon line is lower now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, higher. So that way it would be more. Sorry, my dog is barking. He's definitely angry. Actually, I'm going to see if I can take him downstairs and let my wife watch him for the rest of the stream. But that's my notes. I'll be right back, though. Give me a second.
Yeah, I'll continue on this. So I think one thing I noticed about this is I really like how the body of the character has a sort of blue tint to it, but it's like a very extreme blue, which definitely fits in with the rest of the scene. But as it transitions up to the face, it almost kind of goes to normal colors. Now, I think the face does have some cooler colors on it, but the transition is kind of this super stark cool blue into at least contrast-wise, a very warm face. So I think maybe making the character a bit warmer or having that transition from blue to kind of the warm oranges of the face, having that be a little bit more gradual might give it a more natural look. But I think overall this is looking really cool. I like the grain. I like the kind of spooky look that the blur and the grain gives it. Of course, the cool colors kind of adds to that feel as well. So nice job, Ken. That's great. Both of these have that really creepy, ghostly blue to it. Ooh, I like this one, Fairy. Yeah, this is cool. I think the grain and the contrast does a really nice job of making this creepy. It's got kind of this, like, you can kind of make out that it's a humanoid figure, but you can't quite tell what's going on, which I think is always that sweet spot that horror movies hit. It's like they don't show you the creature all the time completely, or they just give you a hint of it. And I feel like this looks like something from a movie where you're walking past and then you get this glimpse of this ghost at the lake and then they turn back and it's gone. But the whole kind of grain and look to it makes it almost look like it's on an old film or something, kind of a Blair Witch Project feel. So I really like this. Great contrast, both color and value. The bright white and then the blue of what almost looks like hair, I think is really cool. And just the fact that you can't quite make it out. Oh, this is great. Visionary 5, very nice. Okay, so you've composited a few images together here. This is neat. Yeah, I like kind of the focus on the blue. It's very monochromatic, aside from that stark blue that we got in the background.
I'm back.
Oh, welcome back.
Sorry about that, guys. My dog was not cooperative at all.
We just landed on this one, and I was
Okay,
just
cool.
about to say that I feel like, I'm not sure what you think here, but the bottom of the statue there, the bottom of it is very high contrast in terms of the deep darks, but I feel like
Yes.
the people right below that have this very kind of atmospheric perspective to them with the lighter grays. So I think if you're gonna try to push that statue back into the distance, lightening up some of those darks to give it that atmospheric perspective would help. Otherwise, you would need to bring the darks deeper and the crowd closer to us to kind of make the distance look like it fits.
Yeah, absolutely. And another point to that is that whenever people do, again, photo collaging of images, they tend to soften the edges. And the reason why this happens is because, you know, you're taking an image out from another photo, erasing the background, and then bringing into a different photo, which is also erase the background. And so everything just feels super soft, right? If you look at the clouds to the crowd, to the statue to the crowd, and like even the sword to the clouds, like you look at like the sword that she's holding in the statue, like all the edges are super soft. And that is a product of the technique, right? Of like, you know, removing a thing from another thing, like removing a thing from a photo. And because of this, it's like everything is super, you know, blurry. And so aside from the value thing that I agree with Sam about, you want to like literally erase like or sharpen the edges of your subjects so that the edges are all crisp, and then be more selective of where you're softening them versus just it's just a product of the technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you won't have these problems where like the clouds don't really feel like they're really meshing well. It just feels like you just had like a soft brush or a Gaussian blur mask at the bottom. And what you will want to do instead too with the clouds is like use clouds to scale. It's another problem here. Those clouds that smoke don't fit the scale of how close they are to the crowd, right? And what I mean by this is that like if you look at smokes at different scale, like when you look at smoke from like a cigarette, it's like very wispy and very thin, right? And then when you look at smoke like from like for instance the wildfires that we've been having here in California, they're very like pillowy. They're very like the shapes are very clear. They're, like we know in the sense that they're soft because of the way that the light is diffused onto it, but the actual shape of like smoke is not soft. It's like it has pretty strong edges, you know? And then as it gets closer to the sky, that's when it starts to soften and eventually evaporate. But it still takes a while before it gets all the way up there. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And same thing with like, you know, regular water clouds. Like they have density to them. That's why they have like shape to them when we see them versus just more like misty clouds. You know, like the thing that people call chemtrails, like the contrails from an airplane, they're softer because it's the heat of the jet engine with the cool air, and it condenses and just creates like mist. Another way of thinking about this is like fog, right? Like what fog looks like. It's very soft because it's not really dense, you know. So yes, so you get like cool God rays and all this great stuff when it comes to lighting. So I think your scale's a bit off. You might want to work on that as well, along with the value stuff that Sam mentioned, and then
Mm-hmm.
also just be a little bit more deliberate about separating your forms. I think Photoshop actually now has some really good object removing tools, which allows you just like to almost cleverly like you know just take things out like really sharply. Um, but otherwise, yeah, it's just gonna feel very like you know placed in there, you know, just like splattered in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
I think the
And
subject though is super cool.
yeah, I like the sort of ghost-like feel of everything going on with here. It's almost dreamlike in a lot of ways. And that was Visionary 5. It's a very nice job. And then we got Robin slash RD Graphics up next. Okay. Yeah, so this was I think this was the challenge photo that was used on the demo, and I really like the effect you got with the kind of motion blur there, and it's sort of distorted. It's warped off to the right with the head. I think that definitely had some creepy look to it.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. This one I think is a lot more successful because it does feel like the subject's in the scene. Um, the only critique that I have is just the post process part of it. Like it's a little aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's it, honestly, because subject wise, it's pretty cool. It's pretty convincing. You know,
Yeah.
it just might be too contrasty. It might be too like edgy. You know what I
Gotcha.
mean? It's like a little too aggressive. Um, but it doesn't bother me too much. I think it's fine. I think what might also just be um, a little bit more something to consider. It could just be the subject matter itself isn't as crazy as some of the other people, like, or as ambitious. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I don't think this person really, struggled nearly as much probably as some of the others, right? But that's a good point to bring up, is that even if it's like looks like there should be more effort put into something, and you put all this effort into it and make a really crazy image that you believe is crazy, if it doesn't really land, it doesn't, it's not going to land, you know? And if you don't put a lot of effort into an image, but like the subject matter is pretty clear and everything looks pretty good, even though you didn't like do a lot of work like some of the other people, if it lands, it lands. So, most
Mm-hmm.
people will only be critical of the artistry of it if they're artists. But unfortunately, the majority of people who consume media and entertainment are not artists. They
Uh-huh.
don't know. They don't know the challenges of an image like this versus the challenges of the images that we saw before, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll just have a reaction one way or another, and so that's something important. I call this the artistic bias. It's where
Yeah.
you feel one way about how you're there, whether it was because you had some personal growth, personal experience when you were learning it, painting it, working on it, that might feed into your perception of how good your work is. Where in reality, you just learned a lot. That's what makes you feel good. Where you didn't learn a lot of new things, you didn't do a lot of challenging things, but your images like really are impressive, but you don't feel that way. Like, but other people are like, I love it. Like, that's our artistic bias going in the opposite direction. This happens to me all the time. Like, I'll do like a rough sketch, and I'm like, well, whatever, and then I share it, and then people are like, dude, this is the best thing that you've ever done. And then there's other times where I spent like hours on a painting,
Yeah.
and I share it, and people are just like, man, that's pretty cool. So it's
I
really
can
important
relate.
to kind of see people's reactions to get a better gauge of the quality of your work, right? Versus just what you think. I think it's important to have some appreciation, but like I said, it's good to get feedback and eyes on it. So I don't have anything else to say though. I just wanted to kind of like preface this point because I do think some people might feel differently and strongly. You
Yeah,
know,
definitely. Yeah, I think my final note for this one was I kind of like that blur you have on the feet. I think this is totally personal preference, but I feel like if you added that on the left side of her head, since she's swaying over to the right, I think it might add this kind of creepy blur effect because you almost have this sort of like animated thing going where on the left side she's standing straight up, the middle she's leaning, and on the right she's really warping. So like there's almost like a motion pull blur on the left side of her head that could kind of push that creepy sense that she's swaying back and forth really fast. But yeah, awesome job, Robin. I think time wise, that might be good to call it there and switch over. That will give us around 5 minutes or so to do whatever else you want to do. If anyone has any questions, definitely put them in the chat. We can answer that before we have to head out.
all right. Let me find the share screen button and let's share my screen.
Here we are.
All right, I'm done. um, yeah. Yeah. And for those of you who are worried about the doggo, if I ended up murdering him for trying to ruin the stream, I actually put him in the garage in a gated thingy, and I can hear him barking like crazy right now. Because my wife had to go take my kiddo to school. But I don't think you guys could hear him.
No, I can't. I was actually wondering if he was just passed out or
I
something.
just murdered him when I stepped out. No, I have like this little gated thing, but he hates it, and I don't like to put him in there for too long. I don't want him It's like a place where I want him to feel comfortable. You know,
Uh-huh.
it's where we like play and stuff. But I want to use it as like, you're a bad boy. I'm putting you in here. So
Yeah.
thankfully, it's only for a short amount of time. He does need to get a little bit, like, he needs to grow up a little bit. 12-week-old doggo.
It's time to be a grown dog.
Yeah, time to be a grown dog and live your life. But anyway, so even though I woke up early and try to manage my time effectively, it's still like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, life still happens. Still things will happen to you where you can't account for, which is a good segue to kind of another piece of advice I like to give.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I like to schedule nothing time, meaning that there's like 2 hours in my day where I don't do anything. I don't do work. I don't do personal art. I don't spend time with the family. I don't like check emails or not. I just don't do anything. Okay. And this time can be used for anything, meaning that, like, let's say I do want to hang out with my family, then I can use that time. Let's say I need to catch up on my emails because I forgot to, right? I can use that time. Let's say I need to catch up on some work. I can use that time. You know what I mean? Because what I found was that when I didn't do this, when I would like schedule my day, like every hour of my day and like every minute, there would be stuff that come up. Like my dog barks like crazy or something. And I got to take him out, or an unforeseen meeting, or an project that I forgot about. There's all sorts of things that just happen out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
that prepping time to do nothing becomes an opportunity to catch up. So when you start scheduling nothing to do, that's a good time to do something that you should have been doing.
Yeah. I hear that from people a lot, where they don't like scheduling out every hour of their day because inevitably something's going to come up, and like you need some sort of flexibility with your schedule to accommodate that. So it seems like a pretty good way to go about it.
Absolutely. And so that's the last piece of advice I'd give on that. But
Nice.
any other questions before we go, guys? I could probably answer one question. Got like 3
Let me
minutes.
see here. I'll check the chat. I don't think I see any, but I do have a question that I like to ask a lot of people just to see their thoughts on it, which is, like, if you had to go back and give young aspiring artist AJ some advice, or something to steer you, your old self in a better direction, is there anything you would tell yourself? Anything you kind of think you could have done better or change or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And my answer to that is I wouldn't tell the old AJ anything. And reason why is because the person I am today is because of all the mistakes I've made in the past.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to imagine that if I didn't make X, Y, and Z mistakes, that it wouldn't have led me to where I'm at now. And there's a little bit of this premise too that I think people like don't remember about themselves. Like, even if somebody did tell you this advice, doesn't mean you would take it. You know what I mean? Like, especially when you're younger, right? You're way more like resilient to good advice. There's like really funny like quote where it's like, your parents are stupid when you're young, but super smart when you're older. Meaning that, like, when you're young, you think your parents don't know anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you get older, and let's say you have your own kids, you start having a job, and you do all this stuff, you're like, oh, that's what they meant.
Yeah.
Like, there's like this funny TikTok video, for instance, where it's like the parents is like going to their kid's house for the first time, like when their kid has their own apartment that they're renting or whatever. And the parents go in there, they take stuff out of the refrigerator, put it on the counter, and leave it there. They dirty dishes without putting them away. They like leave the blankets on the floor. They don't they do all the stuff that the kid was doing when they were living with their parents. And it's just kind of like to that point. So this idea of like going back in time, telling myself something, for one, I don't think that's good advice, and like good to do because I would still ultimately want to deal with the pain. And two, I don't know if I would actually listen to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I was ready to hear it.
Yeah.
To that.
Yeah, that's a great point, because sometimes you're not really ready for that advice until you're you have the experience that, you know, you can make sense of it.
Yep. All righty.
Well, I think this is a great place to call it. It's looking like you're pretty much done with this guy, right?
Yes.
Some extra shiny bits here and there.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right. Well, yeah, this is a good place to wrap it up. I want to thank everyone in chat for being here today. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Anyone who's lurking or chatting, regardless, thanks for being here. Of course, AJ, thanks so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't you let people know where they can find you online?
Yeah, sure. So you guys can find me on Robotpencil, anything. Go to Instagram, type in Robotpencil, go to ArtStation, Robotpencil, Facebook. That's my alias, so you can find me that way.
Awesome. AJ, thanks again. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
Everyone, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Stay tuned. We got more streams coming up next. Bye, everybody.
Cheers.